following us over the streaming. And so I would like to share with you what we've been doing in the workout sessions. Let me offer the floor to Daniela Tejada. She's with the UNICEF to discuss the presentation of recommendations based on the SDGs we discussed. Those of you presenting, please be ready so that you can come up to the stage and sit down. So, Daniela, thank you. Thank you. And let me invite the representative of SDG 6. That's two of you. Okay. All right. And with gender equality. Hello. First of all, this was a very diverse group representing several countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, from Chile to Mexico, going south to north. And diverse in terms of, people on gender and menstrual security, and people from the academia. So we worked using the draft document, and we try to improve that. These improvements in 5 specific terms. 1, we have to work on decreasing or shortening the gap access, both for sanitation and water, mainly sanitation. And this gap from 2 points of view, the point of view among the various countries, but also within each country in terms of urban versus peri-urban and rural. The other point has to do with funding and public policy in every country. We have to work on funding both scientific information as well as political management. And the third and last point has to do with inclusion of diversities in policies, not only indigenous peoples, but intersectionality, particularly sanitation for women, the widest diversity, and the people of gestating and menstruating individuals. So some things we added, of course, the whole legislative and regulatory improved. The countries are now passing water laws or regulations. So now we need those documents to support our work. One thing is to have them, and the different thing is implementing them. So we have to achieve that universal access to sanitation and then drinking water. We have this point on what water is seen, is recognized as a human right, and many laws are including that. And also we have challenges, water and gender. And when we talk about water and sanitation, sometimes we exclude infrastructure, and we touched upon the need of a greater investment in infrastructure for menstruating people in schools or public centers. I mean, this is a gap we still have to close. And as part of the setbacks, the pandemic, for instance, for public and private or community providers, probably many of your countries had this money so as not to pay a water bill, but services per se are subsidized. And once you have these allowances, because of the pandemic, people didn't have money to pay for water. They couldn't shut up the service, but there was a decrease in investment. And in closing, and another important thing, it's improving water management and adopting this comprehensive approach over and above the wash. And there's a couple of things, but I'll run out of time. Thank you. Please stay here so that now SDG number 7. You have your notes? Let me. Shall I sit down? Okay, I would like to start saying that this wouldn't be possible without the energy. We all have telephones, so we all get communicated. This is thanks to energy, but not all of us has access to energy. So it's really important we leave this as a fair, just transition. We cannot progress without leaving behind settlements, indigenous peoples, continents such as Europe, for instance. So we have these green cities, you have energies, but where are they taking the materials to build solar panels or wind energies? We also have to deal with sacrificed areas. In the mining areas in the north, students are invited to work for mining. We have to educate, we have to reach with clean energy everywhere, and we have to see and be aware of where are we taking the materials for the implementation for these energy. You use the term solidarity. International solidarity based on SDGs progress. We have to put an emphasis that in order to progress, we have to make progress bearing in mind everyone. That's really important. Thank you. Thank you. Sit down. And then then the other representatives were SDG 8 or 9. That's what I meant. Good afternoon. Our SDG 9 group. I'd like to thank all my fellow members, Maria Teresa. It was a great dialogue, very fruitful. Well, first of all, in progress and setbacks, we could see as to the specifications. The specifications were too general. We have to specify by country in further detail, or not the same data, not the same evolution for each country in the region. We need to break down in case we have vulnerable people from rural communities with the different needs in every country, as well as we see several technicalities. But since this is a draft for several people in the region, not everyone has the same things. So how can we understand what a concept means? So for recommendations, what we thought and what we discussed is what type of infrastructure are available. We believe this is really necessary. In the case of this draft, we have to distinguish products, which one are renewables, so have a better characterization. What are the guidelines? What's the ethics code for these? What are the constraints? What are the restrictions to avoid misuse? And a catalog of infrastructure for to see the evolution of technologies. Likewise, together with we have transparency and traceability. When we innovate, when we have better technology, we need it to be transparent so that everyone can have access, but also with a proper use. Plus, characterization of goals to improve the results of SDGs, greater research, and greater scope according to internet. There are a lot more than that. In the case of SDG 9, much more than these points. But we need a better characterization of goals in order to follow the right track to have better results for SDG 9. And that's what we have identified in the case of SDG 9 in our great group. Thank you. Thank you for the energy and this harmony, which is nice at this time of the day. And SDG 11. Welcome. Okay, you can stand up so that the three of you can make the presentation. Helen. This is the SDG 11, and the main agreement is that the cities who have to be thought not only as an abstract concept and as the one single thing, but also terms that these are places where processes takes place at different scales. And by scale, we don't mean size, but processes that have to do with the relationships among people, the, and on the macro level, such as what the SDG sets as a goal are structural processes driving certain dynamics, and these dynamics are cut across by different dimensions, intersectionality, but also from gender and from the racial aspect. You need to understand the complexity and the fact that over the long term, it seems this SDG is difficult to achieve because it means these goals, which are quite different, and would mean different interpretation, because sometimes it seems that what's important for an organization, for a group or stakeholder group, is distributed in a random manner throughout the space. But each one of the relationships which are related to the urban space and the relationship they have with the rural space, so as not to make a difference between the rural and the urban, but as integrated processes with these dimensions and peculiarities that as a whole would allow to understand in greater depth why these goals are there, but also the complexity of why these have not been achieved. Let me ask a few questions about one. Who would feel uncomfortable with gender inequality? Who would be uncomfortable with the fact that some people have a better salary doing the same job? And who would be uncomfortable with the pollution and people doing nothing about this? All right, and that's this discomfort, this lack of comfort, which we believe that are the sustainable communities. Communities working as a communities, working synergistically and celebrating interdependence. That's what we believe it's necessary for sustainability, and so that we can grow not only as a nation, as a country, but also as a world. Thank you. Okay, so for SDG 11, first of all, we started with the public policy approach and the involvement of children, youth, and teens with intersectionality protection. We talked about education and how education can have an influence, and equality and decentralization. We also talked about environmental education as the basis for these SDG. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for your kind remarks, for your input. And in closing this, let me recognize what it means and the contribution of youth when they join deliberation, when they join dialogues, or when they join decision making, because they show us they are the leaders, in not speaking about me, not speaking about the individual. They speak about us. They speak about communities, intersectionality. not leaving no one behind. Groups living in the rural area, women, people which are more vulnerable, and they emphasize what we discussed in the previous panel on SDG 17 alliances. And how can we build alliances without this bulk of the population emphasizing the importance of working as a collective to achieve these goals in order to support those who are more vulnerable. So, a round of applause. Thank you for reminding us about these topics.
And I'd say that would be it for now.
Bien. Bien, gracias por las intervenciones concisas.
Thank you for these brief presentations. You were able to stick to the time. And now we will take up the recommendations made by the young people. And in that, I give the floor to Maria Zaragoza. You have the floor, Maria. Hello, once more. Dear friends, we have had some pleasant moments. We will now close this forum, but before that, we have a very interesting panel. And I'm sure that you have been waiting anxiously for this. And I congratulate you on your presentations. I now invite Daniela Truco, an officer from Social Affairs, ECLAC, Davina Payad, Undersecretary of Sustainable Development from Zamora Municipality, Argentina. Thank you for being here. Juan Pablo, Regional Director from the Youth Institute. And Carlos Carrasco, Research Assistant from Google. He is here. He's been able to come here physically. We have very interesting speakers. Daniela will now continue. And she will be talking about these recommendations. Thank you. Thank you, Maria. And thank you all who have been here with us. We are very enthusiastic about being able to meet personally. We did make an effort to keep these meetings during the pandemic, to consult through the internet. That was very interesting, but it's really great to meet here. I think this dialogue has been very fruitful. We have been able to get conclusions. I also read the report that will be very interesting material for the regional forum, as well as for the ECOSOC that will meet in New York. Some reactions, brief reactions. I think that your analysis in this document are quite complex, complete, both with technical aspects and for promoting dialogue. In terms of SDG 6, it's very interesting how we also emphasize, we see the emphasis on decreasing the gaps and what's improved in the region. Certainly, we have a lot of inequality in terms of access to water and sanitation. So important for well-being and for our health, for the health of the environment, for the quality of living of individuals. And the group of young people are overrepresented in the poorer households. So it's very important to have that in mind. Very, very important is that you mentioned financing in your recommendations. That is very important in this stage when we are so quickly heading towards 2030. We must think about our challenges that require attention, but also how to do it requires often funds and resources. As you do, it's important to emphasize the capacity to mobilize, to raise awareness, to push forward regulatory changes, and just to mobilize. SDG 7, I like the way you spoke about a fair transition, a just transition. At ECLAC, we're also working in that. We have also worked on how to prepare for that just fair transition. And I think that the youth is very important. We must be prepared. Once more, territory, inequality, the consideration of people such as indigenous peoples and others. So this is something that we also emphasize at ECLAC. And as I already said, childhood boys and girls and youth live in often in poverty. In order to be prepared to take action, we need to train in new skills and get new opportunities, job opportunities for young people. But for that, we have to offer more and better education so that the young people may learn these skills. I emphasize a youth for innovation and to innovate. SDG 9, I'd like to stress the work that I am very much into, and that is new technology, connectivity, internet challenges, and evidence shown during the pandemic have expressed the importance of this kind of inclusion in a more digital area. This means not just being connected to internet, having a good connection, because we know that it varies in the region, but it is also necessary to have the skills to have access to this connectivity in order to understand the new processes, artificial intelligence, and the risks related to ethics and protection. And by the way, tomorrow we will be launching a Kids Online study in Chile, where we have evidence on the use of connectivity by very young boys and girls. And in Chile, between 2016 and 22, that age reduced down to 2 years. So the kids are younger now in being connected. It's amazing. And finally, SDG 11, Sustainable Cities. 80% of the population in Latin America and the Caribbean is urban. So it's extremely important to look at it. 100 million persons live in precarious settlements. Talking about inequality and urban segregation, this is not that we live apart, but also that we have different quality utilities offered to people. The cities repeat the structural inequalities of our countries. Thank you. Thank you, Daniela. I will remind you that these interventions are being uploaded in the internet. I now pass on to Fabiana, Undersecretary of Sustainable Development from Zamora Institute, Argentina. We have the floor for your comments. I don't want to be repetitive, so I will take another perspective on what we've been able to share with different SDG groups, not the ones you saw today. I'd like to talk about governments. In Argentina has selected a local government to be here and to listen. As a federal position, it is believed that we must be stronger in terms of territories. COVID left us less time to work on the 2030 agenda, but we have to look for innovative strategies so that in our governments we may have more results in terms of sustainability. In that, we are thinking about different strategies to get together with the communities. We have to continue working in the concept of sustainable development so that different places may take on this concept and apply it from the standpoint of structural policies up to communities with different players. In each SDG, we require understanding, and often it is difficult for people to understand what this is all about. We must therefore build partnerships in the territory and the daily presence so that we may have a stand in these territories to hold a daily dialogue with different players. That means that if we talk about SDG 6, as we just heard about, we need to see how we can talk about responsible consumption, having in mind water. We must be aware of our own responsibility, we who are more than 50 years old, so that you may find a planet where this universal right will not be reason for fight. So we must continue working with parallel roads so as to watch out for consumption, as well as granting access to places that need it. As to SDG 7, having to do with energy, in accessible energies, we believe that at the governments we have to create means on how to access. At my household, I asked for a budget, and I like to look for examples. And the company asked for $6,000 for access. So that mobilized the local government in order to set up a table to look at the financial aspects. Everybody will have to look at this. How can we citizens have access to this? So this is something cross-cutting. You who are young people, intervene in your institutions, or you can come close to the local governments, and you are so needed in this participation because of a strategic thing. We will all have to change our attitudes. We all have to adapt to the needs of the planet. And since we don't have time, we need to face these challenges. Thus, we must see how to convince players, even those who are involved in SDG 9 when we talk about the industry. We talk about technological revolution, but we must also be careful because we're leaving a lot of people behind in terms of technological inclusion. So we have to talk in these tables to join all of the players out in the territories, and we have to have also a mindset on education, for example, and how to hear young people for the society of tomorrow that must be built. There are things that you cannot buy, that you cannot put online. Today we heard about solidarity. but we would also like to have other qualitative aspects that are not seen in the reports. That has to do with the sensitivity, with going to the peripheral neighborhoods, and how to thus contribute to sustainable development. I think that our contribution has to do with this, coming close to the territory, to the players in those local governments, and the international structures should also come closer to local governments. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabiana. Now we have two very similar visions, but at the same time very different. And now we would be interested in listen to the vision by Juan Pablo Dualdevera, as from the National Youth Institute of Chile. Thank you for inviting me to this. I couldn't stay all day, but I am aware of what you have discussed and of the histories before SDG 11. One sees how the international discussion was shaped. Beforehand, this was an expression from outside, from the FAO, trying to be included, to incorporate the view of the youth, of civil society, or of dissident movements. And now we are within the discussions. I used to work in other public institutions in the past. Now I represent another one, and I have learned from these different roles. And now participation, when we agree on the SDGs in 2015, that was indeed an innovation. It had to be participative. Now it has become a fundamental aspect, and that was a result of the victories that the youth has achieved and promoted. When we say leaving no one behind, when a president says that or a mayor says that, we say, oh, well, there is a connection, and this is not by chance. And something that I learned is there somebody from the Dominican Republic here? Yes. That I learned a long time ago. I was in a popular settlement. It was a pre-Christmas period. I have a daughter that is nearly 4 years old, and this was a 5-year-old who had sent a letter to Father Christmas, and she said, I want to have a bathroom. That was her wish. And one says, well, I jotted that down, and I thought, well, I'll knock on every single door, because we cannot see that the dream of a 5-year-old is to have a bathroom or to have running water or a home. And so, as from that zone of discomfort, I realized that we cannot have second or third category citizens. We cannot have that differentiation. Public institutions face a tremendous challenge, just like you. We are moving side by side, so that as a result of the emergencies in the south of Chile, we had to visit Yungay. And talking about SDGs, well, people said, well, what use is that for me? Well, it is useful because it implies access to education, territorial justice, gender justice. It means having running water or preventing another wildfire from impacting that area again. So these are experiences. As mentioned by the Argentinian representative, reports say, well, we have complied with 85% and we still need 15%. But behind that, there are a whole series of things that cannot be expressed in a number, which is willingness, the impetus that you all have. I remember discussions, and I was asked, well, what is civil society doing? Because they are not a part of what is official. This must be translated into the result of a survey. No, this is not simply a result. It's a working logic and it's a working logic that we're here, that we have representatives from different countries of the region discussing all day and reaching an agreement. It's difficult for agreements to arise. There are contingencies, agendas, and so on. But if there is no agreement in 2029, we'll say, well, we're not going to make it. Some regional governments are thinking of the 2040 agenda. I don't think that's bad. It's interesting. But let us think that we still have 7 years to generate structural changes. Today, political agreements among political organizations, regional, local, national institutes. Now, what is it? The question is, what has changed? That is what we have to ask ourselves on the 1st of January. Have we reached the goals, or are we going to ask people whether they're living better now, whether that girl now has a bathroom, whether that dream came true? And we, public institutions, must feed from that. And as our president, Gabriel Boric, said, we must look at people in the eyes, in the territories, and to agree to generate transformations. And here, ethics and diversity. I believe that when one reaches an agreement, that cannot be denied. Maybe we'll speak in a different language, but we cannot deny that. We must form part of the commitment and of doing every possible effort so that this becomes a reality. And your challenge when you go back to your countries, universities, schools, work, or where your families are, is to create these spaces in a square, in a school, in the FAO, in your own countries, in your communities, and to say that there are many, many people, hundreds of people working around a common objective in Latin America, be they in Portuguese, Spanish, or in whatever indigenous language there may be. And that makes us go to our office every day. That is the challenge that summons us. And the same challenge that summons you. So we're late as society. As societies, we still have some time left, and you must ask yourselves, well, what has changed? What has changed with you when you go back to your own countries? What is going to change in your communities, in your municipalities, in ECLAC, in research? You that will be representing us in New York, what is changing in other countries to take this and adapt this? Adaptation, which implies leaving no one behind, is not just a headline, but it has to mean actions. Thank you for this comment, Juan Pablo. Now I'll offer the floor to Carlos Tarasco. Can you hear me? Good afternoon, almost evening. Thank you for staying. First of all, I'd like to congratulate everyone for being here. I know, because I've been there, of the effort, I'm aware of the effort that you have all made in order to use this space to come to Chile. And I am sure that, as I have seen in many young people that I have got to know in these similar spaces, after this type of processes, your lives change, your ability to act as leaders changes, and hopefully more than one person after this experience will take that away with them, so that you can go away and inject more energy to the work that you're doing in your own countries. So I would like you all to give yourselves a warm hand, because self-care is important and acknowledgement is also important. So a warm hand for all of you. In concrete terms, I don't want to repeat what has already been mentioned by my colleagues beforehand, but I would simply like to say that through the SDGs, some elements that I feel are important, based on you continuing to exert your influence and take these ideas to other spaces. When we speak, for example, of SDG 6, everything that relates to water, precisely at present, a term that is being developed with increasing force is that of climatic governance. And climatic governance is basically this link that we can establish between this governance, between enabling capabilities mentioned by the director of the UNDP this morning, and the challenges at a climatic level, at an environmental level that we face. So I would invite you that part of this discussion, which relates to SDG 6, can also be framed within those terms, in terms of climatic governance, and how we can determine what can be done far beyond 2030 based on this, especially in a region such as ours in Latin America and the Caribbean. Now, with regards to SDG 7, I believe it's important for all of us to somehow take these issues of sacrifice zones, of clean energy, to spaces where we're not necessarily discussing these issues. And what do I mean by this? When we speak of an SDG of this type, we normally hope to have a space in climatic entities or environmental entities. But no, the invitation is that this taking on board, that these opinions be taken on to spaces where public policy is discussed generally. If we wish to be comprehensive, we must also search for that in spaces where we discuss governance, democratic governance, how decisions are made, and that these elements come to play, because often, and this is no secret, criticisms and opinions are simply taken to the space based on each issue. I don't talk about climate change except when COP comes up. But no, we must use every single regional space and global space that might be available to talk about these elements, especially in zones such as the ones that we have in the region, where clearly we have sacrifice zones and identified sacrifice zones. Our regional director this afternoon was in Quintero, and for those of you that are not from Chile, Quintero is a zone in the 5th region of this country that has been qualified as a sacrifice zone, and the director was there precisely to know what the situation and the context was of the people that live in that zone. With regards SDG 9, I take away with me a piece of data which is fundamental when it comes to exerting influence, and which is not normally a flag with which a lot is mentioned or that is not mentioned often, but which is fundamental, and that has to do with how we are able to generate disaggregated data based on infrastructure or related to innovation, how we can use that data in order to have a better snapshot of what is actually happening in our countries. And based on that, that we design better public policies. So we face a problem in the region because we lack data, and that data that we lack is not regulated or inadequately regulated, and we cannot do much. And the idea is for you to mention these ideas. The issue of ethics is something elementary and important. And in order to close, I don't know whether with SDG 11, whether you know that this week in Denver, the summit, the City Summit of the Americas is taking place, sponsored by the OAS. And the idea is to have young people, and there will be young people in those spaces, and hopefully you'll be able to share the ideas that you have discussed today with them, because in a space such as that where they discuss cities and sustainability, I believe all that is fundamental. And in order to close, I would like to invite you with this SDG to think how, and this is a term which is not from the UNDP, but from the UN system in general. But indeed, this year we have discussed this in greater depth, and which has to do with how we bring SDGs to the territories and how local governments take on board this 2030 agenda, because we have made progress, but in any case, we have realized that those in civil society and government or in other agencies is that it is important to bring that down to earth at a local, subnational level, because they, at the end of the day, are our best partners for the 2030 agenda. So I would like to invite you for that. You can count on the UNDP and on all the work that we're presently doing with institutional frameworks and youth, so that we can become partners, and in your countries, go in coordination with your country offices. This is indeed an issue that is of interest to us. That is why we're here, and we wish you that you do very well in the Cities Forum, and that in civil society you also have the possibility of being heard. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Very well. We have had these comments that really give us an outlook on how we are going to go ahead into the future. But I'd like to say something. You have brought in and mentioned so many new ideas, and it seems to me that progress towards the 2030 agenda isn't over. It won't be over. We have to continue pushing forward, working together in order to meet these goals that you have talked about. And today and next week as well with the country fora and the work that starts tomorrow are these venues where you as young people can attend, you can organize your agendas. And with all of this, success is what you deserve. These have been wonderful comments. I just enjoy this panel so much. So do have a nice return back home.
Bien, hemos llegado a la última parte del foro.
We have now come to the last part of this forum. For the closing remarks, I call on Christine, focal point for adolescents and youth from Millennials Movement Institute. You have the floor. Thank you, Bruno, so much. Wow, we have come to an end of this forum. This has been, I think, a very constructive day. We have all heard you participating, and I think that an important part of our work is to encourage this kind of a space so that we don't work in isolation. This is a way where we can connect with our peers from Latin America and the Caribbean. Thus, our actions can escalate and have a greater impact than what we already have in our own communities. I'd like to especially thank, I wonder if the slide is up, no, but at any rate, I'd like to especially thank UN and really FAO for hosting this meeting, for supporting us during this process. We are very thankful to Valentina for her tremendous support, and also Raquel from ECLAC. Thank you so much for your support. We have had a lot of work during these months, but this has certainly shown benefits. But this is over. We know that we will have other meetings such as the high-level forum, the summit for the future, and many others. And I hope that you can get involved in these. We also thank agencies such as UNEP, UNICEF, that has helped us in the training here, the UN Development Fund, and others. I also wish to thank to the persons who have been with us at the streaming broadcast. I hope that you have had a pleasant experience, and I'm glad that you have been able to join us in this hybrid kind of fashion. And I think that with that, we will close this forum. Thank you all for being here. And this is an applause for you and for those who are with us on streaming. And that means that we have come to an end. Thank you so much.